After supporting my boyfriend through medical school for 6 years, I discovered he's been secretly engaged to another woman. Yesterday he called me useless, and my phone just exploded with 27 missed calls from him. Let me start from the beginning. I met Marcus during our senior year of college. I was 23, passionate about photography, and he was the ambitious pre-med student everyone wanted to date. When he got accepted to Westlake Medical in Boston, I gave up my spot at the Chicago Institute of Photography to move with him. He said long distance would kill our relationship and that he needed me. I believed him. For 6 years, I worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at Grounded Coffee and afternoons at Callaway & Associates law firm. 60-hour weeks so we could afford our $2,400 apartment while he focused on becoming a doctor. I paid for everything: rent, groceries, utilities, even his extra study materials. I put my dreams on hold because I thought we were building a future together. The truth came out 2 days ago. I was using Marcus's laptop to order his favorite sushi as a graduation surprise when a notification popped up. New RSVP received for Marcus and Alexis's wedding. Alexis? Wedding? I clicked and found myself staring at a wedding website with professional engagement photos of my boyfriend with another woman. According to their elaborate site with its Our Story section, they'd been engaged for 11 months and were getting married in September, just 3 months away. When Marcus walked in from the shower, humming to himself, I turned the screen toward him. His reaction wasn't guilt or shame, it was annoyance. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," he sighed, like I'd ruined his perfect plan. Then came the words that shattered everything. He told me it was a career move because Alexis was the daughter of the director of cardiology at Memorial Hospital. He actually expected me to understand. The worst part? He suggested we could continue our relationship after he married her, since Alexis traveled frequently for work. 6 years of my life supporting a man who saw me as nothing but a convenient stepping stone. By the time graduation rolled around, Marcus had been accepted to medical school, and we had to make our first big decision. Would we try long distance, or would I move with him? I was accepted into a prestigious photography program in Chicago, but Marcus's medical school was in Boston. Looking back, I should have recognized the red flag when he never once considered deferring or choosing a school near me. It was just assumed that my dreams were more flexible. But I was in love. At 23, I thought sacrificing for your partner was romantic, not concerning. So I declined my spot in the program, packed my things, and moved to Boston with him. It's only temporary, I told myself. I can pursue photography after he graduates. Those first few years were tough but manageable. I found a job as a barista at this local coffee shop, Grounded, working mornings from 5 a.m. to noon. Then I'd rush across town for my administrative assistant position at a law firm, working until 7 p.m. Between both jobs, I made just enough to cover our rent, groceries, and basic living expenses. Marcus contributed what he could from his student loans, but it wasn't much. I was exhausted constantly, but there was a purpose to my exhaustion. I was building something with someone I loved. We were a team, I thought. He'd study late into the night, and I'd bring him coffee and make sure he ate something besides ramen. When he'd ace an exam, it felt like we both succeeded. His victories were mine too, at least that's what I believed. Around year 3 of medical school, things started to shift subtly. Marcus became more distant, more critical. The apartment was never clean enough, even though he never helped. My cooking was too basic. I wasn't keeping up with myself like I used to. He'd make these little comments about other women, how put together they were, how ambitious. "Elena, you need to think about what you're doing with your life," he said during one particularly hurtful conversation. "You can't just be a barista and secretary forever." As if I was working these jobs because they were my passion, not to support him. As if I hadn't put my actual passion on indefinite hold. My sister Maya noticed the change before I did. "He treats you like staff, not a partner," she said during one of our rare lunch dates. I defended him, of course. "He's just stressed about clinical rotations. Med school is really intense right now." Always an excuse, always a reason to justify his behavior. In our 5th year together, Marcus began attending more networking events and hospital functions alone. "They're just boring medical things," he'd say. "You wouldn't enjoy them." Or, "It's more professional if I go solo." I believed him because I wanted to. Then came the mysterious weekends visiting his parents, twice a month, regular as clockwork. I was never invited anymore, which he explained away as family stuff, or said they were combined with hospital events. I trusted him. God, I was so stupid. The truth came out 2 days ago, in the most mundane way possible. Marcus had a big graduation dinner with his classmates, and I wanted to surprise him by ordering from his favorite sushi place, Akiko's. Their online ordering system is terrible, so I grabbed his laptop to place the order since my phone wasn't working right. That's when the notification popped up, a wedding website update from theknot.com, new RSVP received for Marcus and Alexis's wedding. I stared at it, thinking it was spam or a mistake. Marcus and who? I clicked the notification, and there it was. A professionally designed wedding website with engagement photos of my boyfriend, the man I'd supported for 6 years, with a stunning blonde woman named Alexis Wilson. According to the site, they'd been engaged for 11 months. The wedding was set for September 30th, just 3 months away. The photos showed them laughing on a beach, her diamond ring prominently displayed. There were pictures of them at parties I knew nothing about, with people I'd never met. The Our Story section claimed they'd reconnected at a hospital fundraiser 2 years ago after knowing each other in undergrad. It said their whirlwind romance had been meant to be from the start. 2 years. He'd been seeing her for 2 years, while I was working 60-hour weeks to keep our lights on. I don't know how long I sat there, scrolling through their engagement photos, reading congratulatory comments from friends and family members, including his parents, who I thought liked me. There were details about their wedding venue, the Plaza Hotel obviously, their honeymoon plans, 2 weeks in the Maldives, and their registry, filled with $400 towels and $900 kitchenware. The bedroom door opened, and Marcus walked walked in, fresh from the shower, humming to himself. "Hey, what are you doing with my laptop?" he asked casually, toweling his hair dry. I turned the screen toward him, too shocked to even cry. "Who is Alexis Wilson?" His expression changed so fast it was almost comical, from confusion to recognition to annoyance. Not guilt, not shame. Annoyance like I'd inconvenienced him by discovering his secret life. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," he said, crossing his arms. "Find out what? That you're engaged? That you've been cheating on me for 2 years?" My voice sounded strange, detached, like it belonged to someone else. He sighed, sitting on the edge of our bed, the bed I'd paid for when we moved in. "It's complicated, Elena. Uncomplicate it for me." That's when Marcus said the words that shattered any lingering doubt about who he really was. "Alexis is Dr. Wilson's daughter. Leonard Wilson, the director of cardiology at Memorial. This is a career move. I thought you of all people would understand that, considering how invested you've been in my career." "A career move," I repeated. "You're marrying someone as a career move. Don't be naive. People do it all the time. Connections matter in medicine. Her father can secure my future at the hospital, get me the best fellowships, introduce me to the right people." I gestured to the laptop. "And what about this fiction you've created? This meant to be romance?" He shrugged. "That's just what people expect. No one wants to hear the practical reasons." "And what about me?" I finally asked, my voice breaking. "Where do I fit into your grand plan?" His answer still echoes in my head. "We can figure something out. It doesn't have to change things between us, not really. Alexis travels a lot for work." He actually thought, genuinely believed, that I would continue our relationship after he married someone else, that I would be his secret girlfriend while he played husband to the hospital director's daughter. "Are you insane?" I whispered. "You think I would agree to that?" "I think you've always been practical," he said, as if it were the most reasonable suggestion in the world. "You understand how these things work. How what works? Lying? Cheating? Using people who love you?" "Using?" He had the audacity to look offended. "I've never used you. We've been partners." I laughed then, a hollow sound that scared even me. "Partners? I've been working 2 jobs for 6 years to support us while you went to school. I gave up my career for you. I've barely seen my family because I couldn't afford the time off or the plane tickets home. And all this time you've been planning a life with someone else." "It's not like that," he insisted. "Alexis and I, it's different. What she and I have is about opportunity and status. What you and I have is real." That's when it hit me, the full, devastating truth. "You don't even see it, do you? You genuinely think what you're doing is okay, that I should be fine with being your support system, your emotional labor, your convenient bedmate, while you build a respectable life with someone else?" For the first time, Marcus looked uncomfortable. "You're being dramatic. This is just how things work in the real world. Not my world." I closed the laptop and handed it to him. "I want you out." He laughed incredulously. "Out? This is my apartment too." "Really? Whose name is on the lease? Who pays 70% of the rent? Who bought most of the furniture?" His expression darkened. "You're making a mistake, Elena. Where are you going to go? How are you going to afford this place on your own? You need me." There it was, the ugly truth he'd always kept hidden. He thought I needed him when it had always been the other way around. "Get out," I repeated. "Stay with your fiancé. I'm sure her apartment is much nicer anyway." "Don't be ridiculous. I'm not leaving. We can talk about this tomorrow when you're thinking clearly." I grabbed my phone and keys. "Fine, then I'll go." I spent that night at my best friend Tara's place, crying until I had no tears left. The next morning, I called in sick to both jobs and went back to the apartment when I knew Marcus would be at his graduation ceremony. I packed essentials, clothes, toiletries, important documents, the few pieces of jewelry that had been my grandmother's. As I moved through the apartment, I realized how little of it was actually mine. The furniture I'd paid for, yes, but almost nothing that reflected my personality or interests. It was all pre-med textbooks, Marcus's sports memorabilia, the expensive coffee maker his parents had given him that I wasn't careful enough to use. The only truly personal item was a small box of photography supplies and portfolios I'd kept from college, my dreams, literally gathering dust in the back of a closet. I called my sister Maya, who immediately offered her spare room. "Stay as long as you need," she said. "I've been waiting for this call for years." "What do you mean?" Her sigh carried the weight of long-held concerns. "Elena, none of us liked Marcus. We just tolerated him because you seemed committed to making it work." "None of you?" I echoed, stunned. "Your friends, your family, we all saw how he treated you, like an employee, not a partner. Why didn't you say anything?" "We tried in the beginning, but you always defended him, and eventually we worried that pushing too hard would just isolate you more. That's what happens in these situations. The person gets isolated, these situations. Like I was a case study in emotional manipulation. The worst part is she was right. Looking back, I can see the gentle concerns friends raised, the way Tara's smile would tighten when Marcus criticized me, how my brother-in-law would change the subject whenever Marcus started talking about his brilliant future. They had all seen it. I was the only one blind to it. After packing my things, I left my key on the counter with a note. "I'll arrange to get the rest of my stuff later. Don't contact me." Then I blocked his number and deleted our message history. 6 years, erased with a swipe. That was yesterday. Now I'm at Maya's, trying to figure out what comes next. Marcus has already emailed me twice from new addresses. First angry, then condescending. "You're making a mistake. We can work this out like adults. Don't throw away 6 years tears because of one misunderstanding. One misunderstanding. As if secretly getting engaged to someone else while your girlfriend works herself to exhaustion supporting you is just a small miscommunication. The strangest thing happened this morning. Tara called to check on me and mentioned, hesitantly, that she'd seen Marcus with Alexis months ago. "You knew?" I asked, that hollow feeling returning. "Not about the engagement," she rushed to say. "I just saw them having lunch at Maple and Vine back in February. He had his arm around her. I wasn't sure what to think. He told me they were just friends when I asked him about it." "You confronted him?" "Of course I did. I care about you." But he said she was a colleague's daughter, that they were discussing a research opportunity, and the body language I saw was just him being friendly. He said if I told you it would just create unnecessary drama during his final semester. "And you believed him?" "I didn't know what to believe," Tara admitted, "but I did start paying attention after that. Elena, I'm so sorry. I should have told you anyway." After we hung up, I sat on Maya's guest bed, surrounded by the scattered pieces of my life, and realized something. I wasn't just mourning the relationship. I was mourning the person I thought Marcus was, the partnership I thought we had, the future I thought we were building, but maybe that person never existed. Maybe I'd been supporting a fiction all along. I don't know what comes next. I'm 31 with no savings, no career path, and a resume full of jobs I took to support someone else's dreams. But for the first time in years, I feel something unexpected cutting through the pain and betrayal. Relief. Relief that I discovered the truth before wasting any more years. Relief that I can finally focus on my own dreams. Relief that I'm free of the constant criticism, the subtle put-downs, the feeling that I was never quite good enough. I think that's the hardest pill to swallow, realizing that while I thought we were building a life together, Marcus saw me as nothing more than a convenient stepping stone, a support system he could discard once he reached his destination. My sister just brought me tea and reminded me of something important. "You supported a man through medical school. You're clearly capable of anything." Maybe she's right. Maybe it's finally time to find out what Elena can do for Elena. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my world imploded. 2 weeks since I discovered my boyfriend of 6 years, the man I supported through medical school, has been secretly engaged to someone else for nearly a year. I'm still staying at my sister Maya's place, sleeping on her pull-out couch and trying to piece together what my life looks like now. The day after I left our apartment, Marcus showed up at Grounded, the coffee shop where I work mornings. He stood at the counter during the morning rush, causing a scene that had my manager giving me concerned looks. "We need to talk about this," Marcus insisted, his voice carrying through the crowded shop. "You're being irrational." I kept my voice level, aware of the customers watching. "I'm at work. Please leave." "This is ridiculous, Elena. Where are you staying? You need to come home so we can discuss this like adults." Like adults. As if secretly maintaining 2 relationships was the height of maturity. My coworker Jamie stepped between us. "She asked you to leave, man." Marcus gave him a dismissive glance before turning back to me. "Fine, we'll talk later." He left, but not before adding, "You're making a huge mistake." That phrase again, his favorite refrain. After my shift, I walked to my second job at Callaway & Associates, the law firm where I've been an administrative assistant for 5 years. I was dreading running into Marcus there too, but instead, I found a delivery, an enormous bouquet of roses with a card that read, "We can work through this. You know we're good together. M." I gave the flowers to Monica, the paralegal who's always been kind to me. The card went into the shredder. That afternoon, I received an email from someone I didn't expect. Alexis Wilson, Marcus's fiancée. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. "Elena," it began, "I'm sure you don't want to hear from me, but there are things you should know. I had no idea about you until yesterday. Marcus told me he'd been single for years, focused on medical school. I'm still processing this betrayal myself. If you're willing, I'd like to meet and talk. Alexis." I didn't respond immediately. Part of me suspected a trap, some attempt by Marcus to get me to engage. But later that night, Tara called with strange news. "You're not going to believe who I just saw having a very public argument at the Merchant," she said, naming a popular downtown restaurant. "Who?" "Marcus and some blonde woman who I'm guessing is Alexis. She was basically shouting at him, and he kept trying to get her to lower her voice. Something about lies and embarrassing her family. So Alexis really hadn't known about me. Marcus had been lying to both of us. The next day, I replied to Alexis's email, agreeing to meet at a cafe far from both my workplaces. I arrived early, scanning the room for Marcus, still half convinced this was some kind of setup. Then a polished woman in a designer dress walked in, looking as anxious as I felt. Up close, Alexis Wilson was even more intimidating than in her photos, effortlessly elegant in the way that comes from wealth and confidence. She spotted me and approached with a direct gaze. "Elena, thank you for meeting me." We ordered coffee and sat at a corner table, sizing each other up. Neither of us quite knew how to start this bizarre conversation. Finally, Alexis spoke. "I want you to know I had absolutely no idea about you. When Marcus and I reconnected at that hospital fundraiser, he told me he was single, had been for years." "When was this fundraiser?" I asked. "March of last year." I did the math. Marcus and I had been together for over 5 years at that point. I'd been working both jobs to support us while he completed his clinicals. "We got engaged last June," she continued. "It was fast, I know, but we'd known each other in undergrad, and it felt right." She twisted the diamond on her finger. "My father was thrilled. The Wilson and Chen families go way back in medical circles. When did you find out about me?" Her expression darkened, happened 2 days ago. One of the nurses at Memorial, Diane, mentioned seeing Marcus with his longtime girlfriend at some cafe. I thought she was confused, but she described you perfectly and said you'd been together forever. When I confronted Marcus, he tried to deny it at first, then claimed your relationship had been over for years, but you were unstable and couldn't accept it. I laughed bitterly. We were living together until 2 days ago. I've been supporting him through medical school, working 2 jobs while he studied. Alexis paled. Supporting him? But his family, they're well off. His father is a surgeon in Chicago. I shook my head, confused. His parents are teachers in Michigan. I've met them several times. We stared at each other as the implications sank in. Marcus hadn't just been living a double life. He'd been creating entirely fictional backgrounds for both relationships. I need to show you something, Alexis said, pulling out her phone. She opened Instagram and handed it to me. This is my private account. Look at the photos from last Thanksgiving. I scrolled through pictures of a lavish holiday gathering in what looked like a mansion. And there was Marcus, arm around Alexis, smiling with a distinguished older man who must be Dr. Wilson. He told me he was visiting his parents in Michigan, I whispered. He told me you didn't exist, Alexis countered. We spent the next hour comparing notes, piecing together the elaborate fiction Marcus had constructed. To me, he was the struggling medical student from a modest background, working hard to build a better future. To Alexis, he was from a prestigious medical family following in his father's footsteps. The more we talked, the clearer it became that Marcus had targeted us both for specific reasons. Me for the practical support, financial, emotional, logistical that got him through school. Alexis for the connections her family provided, the doors her father could open. I feel like such a fool, Alexis said, staring into her untouched coffee. That makes 2 of us. What are you going to do now? She asked. I honestly don't know. Start over, I guess. I've been so focused on supporting Marcus that I never developed my own career. I wanted to be a photographer once. Alexis studied me for a moment. Have you been back to your apartment? No. I grabbed essentials when he was at graduation, but most of my things are still there. Are you on the lease? Yes. I'm the primary leaseholder. I've been paying most of the rent. She raised an eyebrow. Then why aren't you living there? It was a good question. One I didn't have a good answer for. After our meeting, I made a decision. I called the leasing office and explained that I needed to change the locks due to a relationship ending. Since my name was on the lease and I had a perfect payment history, they agreed without issue. I texted Maya, who immediately offered to help. I'll bring Daniel, she said, referring to my brother-in-law. He's been wanting to have words with Marcus for years. We met at the apartment at 3 p.m. when I knew Marcus would be at his residency orientation. The locksmith had already come and gone. Inside, things looked different. Marcus had clearly been there. Some of his clothes were gone, and the place was uncharacteristically tidy. Let's pack up his stuff, Maya suggested. Daniel can drop it off with the doorman at his parents' hotel when they're in town next week for his residency ceremony. His parents are coming. I hadn't considered that I might run into them. Apparently, Tara saw them at that cafe near your work yesterday. She said his mom looked right through her, which is bizarre since she's met her multiple times. That was strange. Margaret Chen had always been warm to my friends, asking about their lives, remembering details. It was part of why I'd believed she genuinely cared about me. We spent the next few hours separating Marcus's belongings from mine, packing his things into boxes with clinical efficiency. I found myself surprised by how little attachment I felt to most of our shared possessions. The furniture I'd paid for, the dishes we'd used, even the bed, none of it held the emotional weight I'd expected. The only moment I faltered was when I found a small velvet box tucked in his sock drawer. For one irrational second, I thought it might be an engagement ring, that perhaps there had been some plan to propose to me as well, some explanation that would make sense of all this. Inside was a pair of diamond earrings and a note in unfamiliar handwriting. For our anniversary. Love, A. From Alexis. An anniversary gift for a relationship that overlapped with ours. I set it aside to return to her. As we worked, Maya found something tucked in a medical textbook, a letter from Memorial Hospital confirming Marcus's residency placement dated 8 months ago. The letter mentioned the continuing tradition of the Wilson Chen Medical Partnership and expressed particular pleasure in welcoming another member of the distinguished Chen family to Memorial. Elena, Maya said slowly, has Marcus ever talked about his family being well-known doctors? No, never. He always said he was first generation, that his parents were teachers who sacrificed for his education. Maya handed me the letter. Then who are these distinguished Chens? I didn't have an answer. Just another piece of the fiction Marcus had created. By evening, we'd packed all of Marcus's belongings and moved them to my sister's garage temporarily. Daniel changed the locks on the windows too, just to be safe. When everything was done, Maya and Daniel left, promising to return tomorrow to help me properly settle back in. Alone in the apartment, my apartment now, I felt strangely calm. I walked through each room, reclaiming the space. In the bedroom closet, I found the box of photography equipment I'd packed away years ago. I pulled out my old portfolio, flipping through images I'd created in college. They were good, better than I remembered. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You changed the locks? Real mature, Elena. We need to talk about this. Marcus. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked the number and continued exploring my newly reclaimed space. In the kitchen, I found a bottle of wine Tara had given me for Christmas that Marcus had deemed too cheap to drink. I opened it, poured myself a glass, and raised it in a silent toast to my new beginning. Later that night, as I was setting up the couch to sleep on, the bed still felt too much like ours, I received another email from Alexis. Thought you should see this, she wrote. Attached was a screenshot of text between her and Marcus. Marcus, we We need to talk about this. You're overreacting. Alexis. Overreacting? You lied about everything. Who even are you? Marcus. I'm the same person you fell in love with. The rest is just details. Alexis. Details? You've been living with another woman for our entire relationship. Marcus. It wasn't like that. Elena and I were practically roommates at that point. I stayed because I felt sorry for her. I stared at those words, feeling a strange mix of hurt and vindication. Even now, Marcus couldn't admit the truth, that he'd used me, that I'd supported him, that without me, he wouldn't have made it through medical school. Alexis. Save it. My father is livid. Consider any connection to Memorial done. Marcus. You can't do that. I've worked too hard for this residency. Alexis. You lied to me, to my family. I absolutely can do this. Marcus. This is so typical. Using daddy's influence the moment things don't go your way. Alexis. Goodbye, Marcus. The final message from Marcus made my blood run cold. This is all Elena's fault. If she had just accepted things like an adult, none of this would have happened. I closed the email, a chill running through me despite the summer heat. For the first time, I felt genuinely afraid of Marcus's reaction. This wasn't just a breakup. It was the collapse of his carefully constructed future. I double-checked the locks and windows before finally falling into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my door. I approached cautiously, looking through the peephole. Marcus stood there, unshaven and wild-eyed, nothing like the polished medical student I'd known. Elena, I know you're in there. Open the door, he shouted, loud enough for neighbors to hear. I didn't respond, just called building security. As I waited, Marcus continued his tirade. You've ruined everything. Do you understand what you've done? The Wilson connection was my ticket. Now I'm assigned to some community hospital program because of you. So Alexis had made good on her threat. The prestigious residency was gone. Security arrived quickly, and I watched through the peephole as they escorted Marcus away. He went without much resistance, seeming to deflate once he realized I wasn't going to engage. After they left, I made a decision. I called both my jobs and requested a week off, the first vacation I'd taken in years. Then I called a locksmith to install additional security, including a chain lock and a camera doorbell. That afternoon, I dug out my old DSLR camera from the box of photography equipment. The battery was dead, but the charger was still there. While it charged, I created a new email address and contacted 3 photography studios in the area about assistant positions. Then I looked up the continuing education programs at the local community college. It was time to start rebuilding my life, not as Marcus's support system, but as my own person. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of excitement about the future. That night, Tara and several other friends came over for an impromptu housewarming, or rather reclaiming party. I'd told them bits and pieces of what happened, but sitting in my living room, wine glasses in hand, I finally shared the whole story. Their reactions ranged from outrage on my behalf to disbelief at Marcus's audacity, but the most surprising response came from Jamie, my coworker from the coffee shop. I never told you this, he said, but Marcus came into Grounded with another woman a few months ago, early morning before your shift. They were all over each other. I tried to tell you, but what? Jamie looked uncomfortable. He cornered me afterward, said you had emotional issues, and that telling you would just trigger some kind of breakdown. He made it sound like he was protecting you. I didn't know what to think, but something felt off. I stared at him, processing this new betrayal. You've known me for years, Jamie. Did I ever seem unstable to you? No, never. That's why it didn't sit right. But he was convincing, and I didn't want to cause problems if I was wrong. That's his specialty, I said bitterly, making everyone else doubt themselves while he gets exactly what he wants. The conversation shifted to more positive topics after that. My photography, potential job opportunities, plans for redecorating the apartment, but a question lingered in my mind. How many others had Marcus manipulated this way? How many people had kept quiet about things I should have known because he'd convinced them I was somehow fragile or unstable? As my friends were leaving, Tara pulled me aside. There's something else you should know, she said. Alexis called me today. How did she get your number? From me, said Jamie. She came into the shop looking for you, but you'd called out. She seemed genuine, so I connected them. Tara continued. She wanted to let you know that Marcus has been telling people you stole from him, that you're the reason he lost his residency placement. She's been setting the record straight with anyone who'll listen, but what? Elena, he's angry. Really angry. Just be careful, okay? After they left, I sat alone in my apartment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. 6 years of my life given to someone who had never valued me, who had been living a complete fiction, who was now actively trying to damage my reputation. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt something unexpected, determination. For too long, I'd centered my life around Marcus's needs, Marcus's schedule, Marcus's future. Even now, in the wake of his betrayal, I was letting thoughts of him consume me. It was time for that to change. I picked up my newly charged camera, adjusted the settings, and began taking photographs around the apartment, light filtering through blinds, shadows cast by plants, the steam rising from my tea. Small moments, beautiful in their simplicity. For the first time in years, I was seeing the world through my own lens again, not as a backdrop to someone else's story. Later, as I edited the photos on my laptop, an email notification appeared, a response from one of the photography studios I'd contacted. They had an entry-level position available and wanted to see my portfolio. I spent the rest of the night updating my work, selecting my best images from college and adding the new ones I'd taken that evening. Before sending it off, I created a new signature for my email, Elena Reyes Photographer. It was aspirational, perhaps even presumptuous at this point, but after 6 years of being defined by my relationship to Marcus, it felt important to declare who I wanted to be. As I finally prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Proud of you, sis. This is just the beginning." She was right. Whatever Marcus had taken from me, years, money, confidence, he couldn't take my future. That belonged to me alone. Update 2. It's been a month since my world turned upside down, since I discovered my boyfriend of 6 years had been secretly engaged to another woman for nearly a year. So much has changed that sometimes I barely recognize my life, or myself. The most immediate change has been financial. Without Marcus's expenses to cover, I've been able to reduce my hours at the coffee shop, keeping just the morning shifts. I still work at the law firm, but now I have evenings and weekends free for the first time in years, and I've put that time to good use. The photography studio I contacted hired me as a part-time assistant. The pay isn't great, but I'm learning constantly, rebuilding skills I'd let atrophy while supporting Marcus. My boss, Diane, is a veteran wedding photographer who's taken me under her wing, letting me second shoot at weekend events. "You have a natural eye," she told me after reviewing my first wedding shots. "Just need to brush up on the technical stuff." I've also enrolled in 2 continuing education courses at the community college, one in advanced digital photography techniques, another in business management for creatives. Small steps toward rebuilding the career I abandoned 6 years ago. My apartment feels different too. I've rearranged the furniture, painted the bedroom a soft blue-gray that I'd always wanted, but Marcus had vetoed as too feminine, and replaced his medical school textbooks with photography books and novels I never had time to read. The space finally feels like mine. As for Marcus, he hasn't given up easily. After security escorted him from the building, he switched tactics, sending a stream of emails alternating between anger, manipulation, and occasional attempts at reconciliation. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," read one. "We had 6 years together. That meant nothing to you? I can explain everything if you just talk to me," claimed another. "There are things about Alexis you don't understand." The most manipulative came last week. "I know things are difficult for you financially. I could help. We could work something out." I didn't respond to any of them. Each message just reinforced what I was slowly coming to accept, that the Marcus I thought I knew had never existed. Last week, though, the situation took an unexpected turn. I was leaving the law firm when I noticed a familiar figure waiting by my car, an older woman with perfectly coiffed gray hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Margaret Chen, Marcus's mother. "Elena," she said as I approached cautiously, "I think it's time we talked." I considered walking away, but curiosity won out. "What could we possibly have to talk about, Mrs. Chen? Please, call me Margaret, and I believe we have several years of misunderstandings to discuss." We went to a nearby cafe where she ordered tea with practiced elegance. I remained silent, waiting for her to speak. "I imagine you have questions," she began. "Just one, really. Was anything Marcus ever told me true?" She sighed, setting down her cup. "My son has always had a complicated relationship with the truth. Even as a child, he would create elaborate stories, different versions of himself for different people. That's not an explanation. That's an excuse." "You're right." She looked directly at me for the first time. "And I'm not here to make excuses for him. I'm here because I owe you an apology." That surprised me. "For what?" "For allowing this to continue. For not saying something years ago when I realized he was living this double life. For pretending not to know you when we saw each other at that cafe recently." I remembered what Maya had said about Margaret looking through Tara. "You knew all this time?" She nodded slowly. "Not at first. Marcus told us he was living with a roommate to save money, which seemed odd given the allowance we provided, but not impossible. It wasn't until we came to visit 3 years ago and saw how the apartment was arranged, how you interacted, that I realized you were much more than a roommate. And you never said anything? You let me believe you were teachers from Michigan. That Marcus was struggling financially? I'm not proud of it." Her perfectly manicured hands fidgeted with her napkin, but Marcus insisted it was temporary, that he was handling it. Handling it? I supported him for 6 years. I worked 2 jobs while he studied. I gave up my career for him. Several cafe patrons glanced our way, but I was beyond caring. Margaret at least had the decency to look ashamed. "I know, and there's no excuse. We should have stepped in. Why didn't you?" She seemed to age before my eyes, the carefully maintained facade cracking. "Because Marcus has always been fragile. Since childhood, he's needed to be the best, the most special. When reality doesn't match his expectations, he creates a new reality. That's not normal." "No, it's not. We've tried to get him help over the years. Therapists, counselors. He never sticks with it, says he doesn't need it, and we enabled him. It was easier than confronting the truth. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too close." "So what are you saying? That Marcus is mentally ill?" "I'm saying he's never learned to face consequences, to accept limitations. We're as much to blame as anyone." "Why are you telling me this now?" Margaret straightened, composure returning. "Because I want you to know that what happened wasn't your fault, and because I want to make amends, in whatever small way I can." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This won't undo the years you lost, but perhaps it can help you move forward." Inside was a check for $50,000. I stared at it, then at her. "What is this?" "Restitution. For what Marcus took from you. Your time, your career opportunities, your financial stability. I don't want your money. I understand, but please consider it, not as charity, but as compensation for wages lost while supporting someone who should have been supporting himself." I started to push the envelope back, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of all those double shifts, the vacations never taken, the equipment never purchased, the courses never completed. Maybe it was the student loans I'd deferred while paying our rent. I'll think about it, I said finally, tucking the envelope into my bag. Margaret nodded. That's all I ask. She stood to leave, then hesitated. One more thing. Marcus doesn't know I'm here. I'd appreciate if you kept this between us. Why? Afraid it might damage his fragile ego? A sad smile crossed her face. Number. Because he's finally facing real consequences for his actions, and I don't want to interfere with that process. What do you mean? Memorial Hospital rescinded his residency offer. Not just the prestigious track, the entire position. Apparently, Dr. Wilson has considerable influence. Marcus has been matched to a small rural hospital in Nebraska instead. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The idea of status-obsessed Marcus in rural Nebraska was almost too perfect. He leaves next week, Margaret continued. His father and I have made it clear that we won't be intervening on his behalf. For once, he needs to solve his own problems. After she left, I sat in the cafe for a long time, turning our conversation over in my mind. The check felt like it was burning a hole in my bag. Blood money, in a way. But also, perhaps a chance to reclaim some of what I'd lost. I didn't deposit it immediately. Instead, I called Maya and told her everything. Take the money, she said without hesitation. Use it for your photography business, or school, or a down payment on your own place someday. Think of it as back pay. It feels wrong. Why? Because you didn't earn it? Elena, you worked yourself to exhaustion for years supporting him. You absolutely earned it. She had a point. And so, after a week of consideration, I deposited the check. The next day, I ordered the camera equipment I'd been eyeing but couldn't afford. A professional-grade DSLR, quality lenses, editing software. Tools not just for a hobby, but for a career. Meanwhile, news of Marcus's fall from grace had spread through our social circle. Tara reported that he'd been conspicuously absent from recent hospital events. Jamie said he'd stopped coming to Grounded altogether. According to Maya, who'd heard from a friend in hospital administration, the story of Marcus's double life had become something of a cautionary tale among the medical staff. But the most surprising update came from Alexis. We'd kept in touch, developing an unlikely friendship built on our shared experience. She called one evening as I was editing photos from a wedding shoot. You're not going to believe this, she said, sounding both amused and irritated. Marcus sent me a letter. What kind of letter? A sob story, basically, about how he's realized the error of his ways, how losing me was the wake-up call he needed. He actually asked for a second chance. I was stunned. You're kidding. Wish I was. He had the nerve to say we had a real connection that he threw away for material concerns. What did you say? Nothing yet. My first instinct was to tell him to go to hell, but then I thought you might want to know about it first. A month ago, this would have devastated me. Confirmation that I had never been more than a convenient support system to Marcus, not someone he truly valued. But now, it just seemed sad and predictable. He's panicking, I said. His perfect plan collapsed and he's scrambling to salvage something. That's exactly what my father said. Alexis paused. Speaking of which, Dad asked about you the other day. Me? Why? He was impressed when I told him how you supported Marcus through medical school. Said it takes real character to put someone else's dreams ahead of your own like that. I wasn't sure how to respond. For so long, I'd seen my support of Marcus as simply what you did for someone you loved. I'd never considered it might be viewed as exceptional or admirable. Anyway, Alexis continued, he mentioned that the hospital foundation is looking for a photographer for their annual gala. It's a paid gig. I thought of you. That conversation led to my first professional photography job. Modest in scope, but significant in meaning. Dr. Wilson proved to be nothing like the intimidating figure I'd imagined from Marcus's descriptions. He was warm, straightforward, and surprisingly down to earth for someone in his position. Alexis told me a bit about your situation, he said when we met to discuss the gala. I have to say, I'm impressed by your resilience. The event was this past weekend, and despite my nerves, the photos turned out beautifully. Dr. Wilson was so pleased that he referred me to two of his colleagues who needed work done for their medical practices websites. You have a good eye, he told me, and you put people at ease. That's rare. As I was packing up my equipment at the end of the night, he mentioned something that caught me off guard. You know, we have a staff photographer position opening up at the hospital in the fall. Mostly documentation work, some PR events, nothing glamorous but steady with benefits. You should apply. A real job, doing what I love. The possibility took my breath away. On my way home that night, I received a text from an unknown number. I heard you were at the memorial gala. Replacing me already? We need to talk. M. Marcus's residency in Nebraska must have fallen through if he was still in town. The old Elena might have responded, might have felt a flicker of guilt or responsibility, but that Elena is gone. I deleted the message without responding and drove home to my apartment. Peaceful, organized, mine. On the wall, I've hung a series of photos I took during those first days alone. They're not technically perfect, but they capture something important, the beginning of my new life. Tomorrow, I have a meeting with a local gallery owner who's interested in displaying some of my work in an upcoming showcase of emerging photographers. Next week, I start my final photography course at the community college. And in the fall, I'll apply for that hospital position, as well as others that match my growing portfolio. For the first time in years, I'm excited about the future. My future, shaped by my choices, my talents, my dreams. Not as someone's support system, but as the main character in my own story. Marcus took 6 years of my life, but that's all he gets. Final update. It's hard to believe it's been 6 months since my world imploded. 6 months since I discovered my boyfriend of 6 years, the man I supported through medical school, had been secretly engaged to another woman. Looking back at my first post, I barely recognized the person I was then. Shell-shocked, uncertain, blaming myself. So much has changed in ways I never could have predicted. The most visible change is my living situation. 3 months ago, I moved out of the apartment I'd shared with Marcus and into a small but bright one-bedroom closer to downtown. The rent is a stretch, but the natural light makes it perfect for my photography work. Plus, it has no memories attached to it, no ghosts lingering in the corners. That wouldn't have been possible without Margaret Chen's restitution check. After much soul-searching, I used part of it for a security deposit and first month's rent, part for photography equipment, and invested the rest for future education expenses. Maya says it's the least the Chen family could do, and she's right. 6 years of supporting someone through medical school isn't cheap. Professionally, everything has accelerated faster than I could have imagined. The photos I took at the Memorial Hospital Gala led to more referrals, which led to a growing client list. I'm now the regular photographer for 3 medical practices, a law firm, not the one where I used to work, and a local magazine that publishes neighborhood guides. But the biggest news came last month. I was offered the staff photographer position at Memorial Hospital. It's full-time with benefits, health insurance, retirement plan, paid vacation, things I haven't had since I left my career track to support Marcus. The irony isn't lost on me that I now work where he so desperately wanted to be. Dr. Wilson has become something of a mentor, introducing me to people who need photography services and recommending me for projects. I believe in investing in talent, he told me recently, and in second chances. Alexis and I maintain our unlikely friendship. She's engaged again, a doctor from another hospital, someone she knew before Marcus. He seems genuine, and more importantly, transparent. No secret lives, no elaborate fictions. How do you trust again after something like this? I asked her over coffee last week. She considered the question carefully. I don't think it's about blind trust anymore. It's about paying attention, trusting your instincts, and not ignoring red flags out of some misplaced loyalty. Words I wish I'd understood years ago. As for Marcus, his story took turns I never expected. After his Nebraska residency fell through, he never showed up according to Margaret. He attempted to salvage his medical career through a series of increasingly desperate moves. He tried reaching out to former classmates for connections, applied to programs across the country, even attempted to leverage distant family relationships. Nothing worked. The medical community is smaller than one might think, and word had spread about his duplicity. It wasn't just Alexis and me he had lied to, it was colleagues, supervisors, mentors, people who had vouched for him based on false information. 3 months ago, Margaret called to inform me that Marcus had moved back to Chicago to live with his older brother. He'd taken a job doing medical billing, not practicing medicine, just processing paperwork for a large hospital system. A far cry from the prestigious surgical career he'd envisioned. He's angry, she admitted, blames everyone but himself. But he's alive, he's employed, and maybe someday he'll gain some perspective. I wished her well, but felt no need to stay updated on Marcus's life. Our chapter was closed. Or so I thought. Last week, as I was leaving Memorial after a photo shoot for their new pediatric wing, I quite literally ran into him in the parking garage. He was wearing a rumpled suit instead of the crisp dress shirts he used to favor, carrying a worn messenger bag, rather than the expensive leather briefcase I'd given him for his birthday 2 years ago. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I hadn't seen him since that day he showed up at my apartment, wild-eyed and angry. He looked different now, older, diminished somehow. Elena, he seemed genuinely startled. "What are you doing here?" "I work here," I replied, gesturing to the camera bag over my shoulder. "Staff photographer." "At Memorial?" Disbelief colored his voice. "Since when?" 3 months now. He absorbed this information, his expression cycling through confusion, anger, and something that looked almost like respect. "I'm just here for a meeting with the billing department," he finally said. I nodded, already moving toward my car. I had nothing more to say to him. "Elena, wait." He stepped forward, blocking my path. "I've been wanting to talk to you. To explain." "There's nothing to explain, Marcus. You lied. To me, to Alexis, to everyone, for years." It wasn't like that. The familiar defensive tone crept into his voice. "Things got complicated. I didn't know how to fix it without hurting someone, so you just kept hurting everyone instead? Great solution." He had the grace to look ashamed, at least momentarily. "I made mistakes, but what we had was real. You know that." I studied him, wondering if he actually believed what he was saying. "What we had was a relationship built on lies. You used me to get through medical school, then planned to discard me once I'd served my purpose. That's not fair. I cared about you." "Did you? When exactly? When I was working double shifts to pay our rent? When you were spending holidays with Alexis while telling me you were visiting family? Or maybe when you were secretly engaged to her while living with me?" He flinched. I never meant for it to go so far. But it did, and here we are. I stepped around him. "I need to go." "To what?" "Your exciting new life as a photographer." Bitterness seeped into his tone. "You always said you were going to do that, but you never did. Not until everything fell apart." His words hit a nerve. Not because they were true, but because they revealed how little he'd understood me. "Because I was supporting you, Marcus. Because someone had to pay the bills while you studied. Because I believed in you more than I believed in myself. And now I believe in me." As I turned to leave, he called after me. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't found out? If we'd just continued like before?" I paused, considering the question. I would have lost more years, more of myself. So no, I don't regret finding out the truth. Even though it hurt, especially because it hurt, the pain was necessary. It woke me up. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, of the fundamental change in me. I was no longer the Elena who would sacrifice everything for his dreams. I was someone new, someone stronger. I still think about you, he said softly. About us. I don't, I replied, and realized it was true. The space Marcus had occupied in my thoughts had shrunk to almost nothing, replaced by new priorities, new relationships, new ambitions. As I drove home, I thought about how differently that encounter would have affected me 6 months ago. I would have analyzed every word, searching for validation or closure. I might have even felt a pull toward the familiar pattern we'd established, the comfortable role of supportive partner. But now it was just a strange, somewhat uncomfortable interaction with someone from my past, a reminder of how far I've come. That evening, I had dinner with Tara, Jamie, and several other friends at a new restaurant downtown, the kind of place I never would have suggested in my previous life, too concerned about the expense. We celebrated my recent promotion at the hospital, staff photographer level 2 with a modest raise, and Tara's acceptance to graduate school. To new beginnings, Jamie toasted, raising his glass, and to endings that should have happened sooner, Tara added with a wink. Later, as we were leaving, Tara linked her arm through mine. You know what I noticed tonight? You laughed. Like, really laughed. I don't think I heard that sound once in the last 2 years you were with Marcus. I hadn't realized it, but she was right. With Marcus, I'd been constantly walking on eggshells, measuring my words, moderating my reactions to avoid criticism. Freedom from that scrutiny had returned a part of myself I hadn't even known was missing. This weekend, I'm flying to San Francisco for a photography workshop I've wanted to attend for years. Next month, I'm taking my first real vacation in over half a decade, a solo trip to New Mexico to photograph the landscape. And in the fall, I'm starting a master's program in visual arts, part-time alongside my hospital job. My life is full in ways it never was with Marcus, full of growth, challenges, friendships, and most importantly, possibilities. Sometimes I look back at those 6 years and feel a twinge of regret for the opportunities lost, the time wasted. But then I remind myself that every experience, even painful ones, shapes us. Without those years with Marcus, without the betrayal and its aftermath, I might never have found the strength to pursue my own dreams with such determination. I no longer think of myself as someone who was used and discarded. Instead, I'm someone who survived deception, reclaimed her power, and built a better life from the pieces. That's not just a happy ending, it's a new beginning.